Okay, hello. Here is a video request from Lovin' Lightland, I think it is. What do I think about Hermeticism? Hermeticism is, there's lots of stuff to talk, lots of different subjects within the subject of Hermeticism. Hermeticism, in short, would be the religion of Egypt, ancient Egypt. But it's a little bit more murky, a little bit not as cut and dry about the whole subject as some other thing. Hermeticism basically would consist of what you read in the Corpus Hermeticus, which is kind of like, the Bible of Hermeticism. It's kind of knowledge passed down for a lot of years, over the years. And so it's kind of, you know what I mean? So it's not like a book that was written by a certain person and you know exactly when he lived and all that kind of stuff in a certain year, and then that's the book. It's more like just knowledge from ancient Egypt, and then some other dude writes it, and then some other dude, they translate it, and then now we've got some kind of watered down version of it. It's called Hermeticism because it's from Hermes. We've all heard of the god Hermes, the Egyptian or the Greek god Hermes, the messenger god. But the book, what's it called? The Hermeticum Corpum was supposed to be, the legend was supposed to be written by Hermes Trismegistus, who everybody compares to the god Hermes. Who lived, a lot of people think, like at the time of Abraham, they would say, which is like 1800 BC. And then you have some other Egyptian, leaders in the past who you could connect to that sage or that line of thinking. You have Imhotep, and, the earliest one was like 2800 BC, and then Akhenaten. Actually, they didn't mention that in the as being of that. Who they thought it may be. There was another one that sounded like him. Akhenaten was definitely of that lineage, though. I think he lived in 1300 BC, at the same time as Moses. So when you're going to talk about Hermeticism, you could talk about their actual philosophy, which I'll talk about at the beginning of the video. But also, with the whole subject, people became more, kind of brought it back and to common knowledge in the Renaissance in Europe. So if you want to really talk about, Hermeticism, and it's actually said this in the Hermetic Bible there, that, you can define stuff by how it relates to other things with contrast. And so in order to really explain, Hermeticism in the minds of everybody, the principles of it, it would be good to contrast that against, the Dark Ages, the mindset of Christianity in the Dark Ages, and how it relates to everything. So I read the Hermetic Corpus, which is like 11 chapters. It's basically written by this guy, Hermes Trismegistus, who he's talking to his son. I think his son's name was Tal, in a couple of chapters. And then he was, at the big chapter, he was talking to a king called Asclepius, who lived, I guess, sometime in Egypt. And he's just giving all of his legends. I'm sorry, not legends. Philosophic ideas about stuff, concepts, religious concepts, lessons about religion, and then the king Asclepius, and then in the other chapter his son Can, or whatever his name was, ask questions and comment, and it's kind of like a dialogue. And another thing that some other things that I listened to, the Legends of the Gods, which is on my website that you can read. And you may be able to download it too. I may have taken that off though. I don't know exactly what I have. I know you can. I'm pretty sure you can download all the Mahabharata off my site. But Legends of the Gods, and then you have, which is basically stories of ancient, battles between the gods in those days, and then the Emerald Tablet of Thoth, which is like the ancient story of everything, and so that would basically be, and then there's one other one, but that's basically the religion of ancient Egypt. If you cover those things. So Hermes Trismegistus was, a sage who lived a long time ago. And in those days he was called Thoth. And then they made a connection between Thoth and Hermes. So, if you're going to talk about Hermeticism, another subject within that, if you want to, cover all the bases, so it would basically be to understand what it all is, without being confused, because it can be confusing. I mean, it's really murky. Basically, the religious relationship between Greece, Egypt, and Rome and Christianity and all that kind of stuff. So let me just do a really quick religious history lesson of ancient religion and how it relates between those countries. The very first civilization in the whole world, there were two of them. Well, there were three of them. There was the Indus Valley in Pakistan, where was an ancient river that doesn't exist anymore. But that, you don't even, and they all started at the same time. Indus Valley, the Mesopotamia, and Egypt. They all started at 3200 BC, which is the same time as the Mayan calendar starts, interestingly enough. But the Indus Valley you don't really want to throw into that. That's just, they just knew that there was some big city at 3200 BC, and that's all we know. So the two oldest civilizations in America that have continuously, we can trace their legacy up until the present. It's going to be the Middle East, the Mesopotamia, Iraq, the Euphrates in Iraq, and then Egypt. Those two countries, those two places, and they both started about 3200 BC. That's when the King's List started. Same time. They're like 1,000 miles apart. So out of that came the traditions and the religions, and the science and all that kind of stuff, legends and gods and all that of the Jews, and then all of the of the Greeks. The Greeks are on those islands just on the other side of the Mediterranean as Egypt, and and Iraq is also off there. So it's all in the same area. So all these people were, intermixing and learning from each other for a long time. Greece in those days, and it's even written in the Hermetic Corpus Hermeticum, that the Egyptians, they were talking about the Greeks, and that the Greeks were, they looked down on the Greeks. The Greeks were kind of more barbaric, but the Greeks were also shared a lot of stuff. They communicated and traded and all that kind of stuff with the Greeks. So at one point he said something like, "Yeah, the Greeks are very primitive. All of their language just has to do with arguing, and so let's not teach too much to the Greeks, because then they can just twist it into what they want," which kind of shows, which is the first historical example of people not wanting to corrupt ancient teachings. That's why people weren't allowed to print the Bible and stuff. They were afraid. The Catholic Church was afraid people were going to rewrite the Bible and this kind of stuff. And so that's why, one of the reasons why they don't want to teach too much to too many people, because then they could take it and then change it into their own thing and teach that, which people do all the time anyways. But, so anyways, Greeks learned all their stuff from the Egyptians. And you know, mixed it with their own culture a lot too. Greeks are kind of a mixture between northern barbarians, like the Doric invasions. Those are the northern barbarians, like Slavic tribes that came down, or Scandinavians that came down in the 800s BC to invade, and then they kind of bring a little bit more barbarianism there, and bring their own Norse gods culture in there and stuff, and then it just mixes with the old culture. So that's been going on forever. So basically, to make the story really short, the origin of everything we know and everything, our society, Western society, England, American, it's not Greece, it's Egypt. It's Egypt in the Middle East. Because we kind of forget that a lot of times. We're just like, oh yeah, Egypt, pyramids, pharaohs and shit, but all of their religion or whatever, we don't know anything about it. Because it's just so old that it's so long ago that we don't actually have unadulterated Bibles, and stela and all that kind of stuff from some specific tradition. It's just more like passed down, and so that's why we don't know like who Hermes Trismegistus is. We don't know when he lived. We just have to guess, and then we say, yeah, he was the god, and that kind of brings up another concept of what are gods? What did we consider to be a god in those days? And in those days, real people, really smart sages and stuff, or leaders, would then become gods afterwards. Saint Augustine of Hippo, in his book City of God, written towards the end of the Roman Empire, was saying that he was listing off all of these ancient Greek gods, and he was like, yeah, these gods were people, and he even said what year they were born. He was really educated, and I think, in those days they had a lot more access to books that don't exist anymore and information that doesn't exist anymore. And so, I mean, the legend, the stories in the books, the special information, yeah, it was pretty much common knowledge to him and educated people that, all that Apollo and Zeus and all these guys, or at least Hercules and the demigods and stuff, are actually legends of actual people who did things, and then after they die, they become deified. Like he said, Hercules lived like in the 600s BC and stuff, and that then people deify him, and then we have all these gods, and because that was kind of, he was laying the case for Christianity. We have one God, so, all right. So, anyways, that's kind of an introduction. So let me go into just the philosophy, Hermeticism, and then I'll maybe get sidetracked from time to time and relating it to some of the other subjects that have to do with the whole concept. So anyway, yeah, so this guy, Hermes Trismegistus. Oh yeah, let me finish with the concept of God. So Hermes Trismegistus was just a dude who lived in Egypt, and then after he dies, he's so smart, and he starts a religion, and then they turn him into a god. And in those days, his name was Thoth. And then, the Egyptians or the Greeks adopt it, and so then they change the names around to Hermes, and then their own gods. And the Romans did the same thing. Romans had the same gods as the Greeks. Zeus became Jupiter. Hera became Athena. No. Athena was the warrior. Artemis became Athena. Hera became the queen of gods. Became I can't remember, but yeah, you could, like, all the major gods from the Olympic pantheon, you could just switch them over and then just new names. So the information just gets passed down. Okay, so Hermes Trismegistus was a dude, and let's talk about first the Hermetic religion of what I read in Hermes Trismegistus, the Hermeticus Corpus. That's basically just the philosophy, which is really fascinating, because as I was listening to it, I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is brilliant. I agreed with it, unlike the stuff you hear from like some Catholic priest saying some watered down religion, or some fundamentalist whatever religion just saying really ignorant stuff. Like this is stuff I liked and I was agreeing with. So the basic premise is the theology of Hermes is that the universe and God, is everything that exists, and everything in existence is part of God. And that's what I believe. I believe that everything in existence is just part of the body of God. And that God is unchanging and never gets corrupted. It's always the same, and it's specific little children of God that are what becomes corrupted. So the world that we live in now, the very temporal world, where you live and you die and stuff is shorter, that's the stuff. That's what changes. But God itself never changes. So it's kind of like, and I think, in the book they actually mention this. I'm not making an analogy. They actually mention this well, let's talk about like the concept of sin. That word sin is really old, and when people translated the sin, I think the meaning of the word got a little bit corrupted. Nowadays, when somebody says, "Oh, that's a sin," it's kind of like you're doing something bad that you know you're not supposed to do, but you do it anyway, and it's something bad that's not supposed to exist. But in the philosophy of the Hermetic philosophy, sins, and stuff that, evil. Also, the word evil. Evil, and nowadays we think of something that's bad that shouldn't exist. That's just, that you need to disdain and like, But in those days, evil meant more just something that is of this world, is of our temporal world, and things that can get in your way from becoming, ascending to become a god, to become more part of the timeless God. So, for example, a sin would be, being a drug addict. That's a sin, but it's not, and you shouldn't try to do. But sins in the Hermetic tradition always exist. Like there's always evil, and because that's just part of reality. Like the world we live in now, with wars and problems and stuff, will always exist. It's natural. Sin is natural. Evil is natural. It's not something that you want to eradicate. You want to eradicate it in your world. That you're dealing with right now, but you don't. But you want to look at it as something that's just natural, that exists everywhere. Like a world where, like the Earth, where they're fighting and all this wars and problems. That's just because we're all a bunch of souls living on this world, sharing a certain experience. But worlds like this exist everywhere. There's a countless number of these worlds out in the universe, and it's because it's like a level of society that you're at, and that's the concept of God being eternal and unchanging. Because there's always new souls that are being born and passing up through the ranks, and so that's just a level of existence that will always be there. So it's not something to get stressed out about. And I think ever since the unadulterated, pure religion of the ancient Egyptians, we've been getting more and more simplistic in our philosophy, and so then we make blanket ideas about stuff and think that, about good and evil, and that like it's all only centered in this planet, and that once we get evil eradicated on this planet, then it's gone forever, and we don't have to worry about. But they're not looking at it more expansively. Which kind of brings up another subject within the whole concept of Hermeticism is, well, how would religion devolve? Like, religion's supposed to evolve and get better. Why are we getting more watered down? And that kind of brings in the other part of the Hermetic body of work would be the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which is this other, really murky, you don't really know what it comes from. I guess it comes from the Emerald Tablets, which were then lost to time, but then they were translated to something which was untranslated to something else, and then they found it again. They rediscovered all this Hermetic stuff, ancient Egyptian stuff, back in it was in like the late 1400s. It was Cosimo de' Medici, the richest, most powerful dude in Florence, Italy. Imported this stuff from like Egypt. I'm sorry, Greece. And so people nowadays think that the Hermetic Corpus Hermeticus, what they had translated, in the 1300s, was written by Greeks in like the 1 and 2 and 300s, like 1,000 years beforehand, translating stuff from ancient Egypt, and but the ancient knowledge actually comes from Egypt. So, and that's what started the whole Enlightenment. People kind of taking a second take and making their religious concepts more complex again after being really simple in the Dark Ages. So, the reason that the philosophy got more watered down and more ignorant as time went on is because, and as you read the Emerald Tablets, is Greece, the culture of Greece, just like, not Greece, Egypt. Just like the culture and religion of Greece came out of Egypt, and Rome came out of Greece and all that kind of stuff. The culture and religion and technology and everything of Egypt came from Atlantis, which is before. So which was way more advanced than even we are now. So let me just recount what I remember hearing in the Emerald Tablets, is that Hermes, Thoth, actually the god Thoth, he was a dude recounting the tales of the fall of Atlantis and the beginning of Egypt. It's the origin story of Egypt, and so now I think Atlantis, as we all believe, was an island off in the Atlantic or in the Caribbean that had sunk under the waves and killed everybody around 9,000 BC. So we're talking 11,000 years ago. And the first mention that we have of that was with Plato, talking in his book Timaeus and Critias. He's just telling the stories of what his grandfather Timaeus told him, who had been to Egypt, and it was common knowledge in Egypt that all the information that they had came from 9,000 BC, and that there was this place called Atlantis, which had a war with Egypt, and Egypt or with Greece, and Greece won, and then Egypt, Atlantis sunk, and interestingly enough, archaeological evidence suggests that all of these big, cities from antiquity, like Ephesus and Baalbek, yada, 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 the first, and pretty much all of these, because I've been checking dates on all of them, the first archaeological evidence of these was about 8,000 BC, which was 10,000 years ago. So when Atlantis fell, the survivors, and this is actually written in the Emerald Tablets, they went to Egypt, and then Thoth, who was the leader, sent all of his top dogs out to all corners of the world to try to keep their culture going, to teach. And so that's when they started these settlements. All of these cities which have survived to today, and they're the ruins, were started back at the fall of Atlantis 10,000 years ago. And archaeology says this stuff. And it's interesting because a lot of the archaeology of the ones that you can't even explain, like the Temple of Baalbek, I was looking at it, and people just conveniently, like the one temple that has the huge, I think it's called, the Temple of Jupiter? The one temple with the giant stones that are 1,000 tons, bigger than Greyhound buses, stacked up on top of each other perfectly. They conveniently ignore it. They don't even write anything about it, on Wikipedia, because they throw their hands up. They're well, we know when this one was built, and that one was built, and that one was built on top of the whole complex. But that other one, okay. So I think those ones were built at the beginning, 9,000 BC, as well as the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Maybe they did touch-up work on it since or something, but I think that was pretty much built. And Graham Hancock says that like in 12, it actually points to the center of Orion Nebula from 12,000 BC. If you wanted to, because Orion was a big, popular, big in the religion of ancient Egypt. So that's kind of like a reason why they think it started. It was built then, but yeah. So the ancient tablets of Thoth, talk about the origin of Egypt. So he said, back in Egypt, Atlantis, all of the different the people, they got impious. They were not believing in God, and they got, God as in we're all part of this one being, and we're all part of the same family that nurtures you and everything. They got greedy and stuff, and so they tried to. They had a pyramid that harnessed the energy of the earth, and they tried to harness the laser beam to make it more powerful, to harness more energy. It's called the sacred fire. They mention it over and over again. And they had like a central square in Atlantis, which had the sacred fire. So they had a big pyramid in the middle of Atlantis that harnessed the energy from the earth, which gave them energy. They tried to make it too powerful, and it cracked, and it sent too much energy out and made Atlantis sink. Now, anybody who's, pays attention to all the New Age stuff, that's pretty much one of the popular ideas about Atlantis. Well, they got all that information from the Emerald Tablets. That's the original idea about Atlantis. If you want the details of Atlantis, just listen to the Emerald Tablets, which is knowledge passed down from ancient Egypt, which has survived until today, just in kind of a overly processed, where people translating off of books that had since become extinct, and then that book becomes extinct. So it's just kind of like, but it's passed down through letters, words, and so you can get a lot of details, and they faithfully translate. I don't think in those days people had much of a reason to, switch it around to their own meaning. But there was some corruption. For example, in the Hermetic corpus, they said that a man who doesn't have children is destined to be reborn as an asexual being, and not in a not very good form. So you don't want to. And so that's a little bit fundamentalist and fear-based. That's not true. But anyways, I guess I'll go back to the Hermetic philosophy. So the basic philosophy, they mentioned a lot of cool stuff, like, that I agree with, that, like, they were very specific about reincarnation. You reborn in more and more advanced state, life after life, until you don't have to be reborn on the earth anymore, and then you can be reborn, in a higher realm, and live longer and live forever and all that kind of a stuff. And that when you're reborn over and over again, you have to be reborn on the planet Earth, because the planets have a certain, like, energy signature around them that is in line with your soul. And so, but you judge yourself. So when you die, and this is where that whole Egyptian concept of, and I think Hermes was one of the gods who did this, who guided you to the afterlife, would guide you to, the next level to see if you would ascend. And so, that's where this tale of they'd put your heart on a scale, and if your heart is heavier than a feather, then you get reborn. And if your heart is lighter than a feather, then you get to ascend. And so, you die, you judge yourself, and if you lived a good, upright life, then you get to be reborn into a better situation until you can graduate off of the earth, which is really similar to the, enlightenment concept from the Buddha, and, I guess, ascending to heaven in the Christian, it's extremely watered down Christian idea of it. They said that if you're bad, you would be reborn. You could go backwards in the reincarnational, so you could be reborn as animal again. But they also said that when you're first reborn, you're born in as the most primitive animals on the earth, and then you're reborn as a fish, and then you're reborn as like a rodent, and then you're reborn as like a domestic animal, and then the highest animal that you're reborn in before you're a human is birds. You're a bird, which makes sense to me because birds live free and they're smart too, and they're very ancient. They're descendants of the dinosaurs, which is stuff that I already believe. I mean, it's stuff that I intuitively already just know, just because it's what makes sense, and it's what I've talked about in YouTube videos a bunch of times. I mean, if somebody talked to me, what do you think about reincarnation and like the path of the soul? I did a couple weeks ago, and I was basically reciting the same exact thing that's written in the Hermeticus corpus, because it's common knowledge. It's common sense, is what it is, and so yeah, it's kind of cool that I can see the common sense of it and explain it, and it's actually written right there in the Hermetic corpus. So you don't even have to read. You don't have to read these Bibles to know. You just have to open up your mind and you can figure it out yourself. But so then again, if I'm talking all this kind of stuff, you could be under the impression, well, maybe you're just making it up and you just liked what you were listening to. But no, I actually specifically remember them saying that about the reincarnation I think it was in the Aeschylus, talking about the path of the soul and everything. But one thing that he kept stressing over and over again is how the God is incorruptible and never changing, and it's stuff on this earth is what changes, because we're all individual souls. And the idea of God is to continuously multiply, to share, and to get new experiences. And one concept that was thrown around a lot in that was that it was called the mind. It's the mind of God, and so what I took away from that is the goal. If you want your soul to ascend, your soul to advance and develop, is that, and also not just your soul, but society. But in the book, they're mainly talking about your soul. Is you need to focus on. You need to keep your focus on God. So you need to always be reminding yourself that we're all part of this, giant universe. That's this one being, a live being that it's so big you can't even describe it, and it's formless because it's universe. Universe is formless. It goes out, and you're just like, what? But then there's little things inside of it, and God's inside of it. But you need to focus on the fact that you're a never-ending being, and that you will never die. And this is where Christians get it fucked up real good, is that they're like, oh yeah, you'll never die if you take Jesus as your personal Savior. Well, no, the original idea is that you will never die. And this is what Jesus said too, if you read the Bible. You will never die, period. You will never die. But what we need to do, and the people, you can help yourself out by acknowledging that. Once you realize that you will never die, then that little glass ceiling right above your head that keeps you from adjusting goes away, because now your sights are way off in the distance, And that's a pretty simple concept, The higher you set your goals, the higher you're going to be able, the more you're going to be able to achieve. Like with my timeline, my goals are really big to include everything. And so I work on it, and I work on it, and work on it, and the final product is going to be a lot better than if my goal is just to put like the basic stuff. And then I'm done with it, and now what? If I wanted to make it more, then I would have to redo it and change it. You're better off just setting really high, like your sights really high since the beginning. But yeah, so all you have to do is just acknowledge, just realize that you're never going to die. And if you don't acknowledge that, you'll just have to keep getting reborn until you do acknowledge it, and then you get to ascend. And so, because if you don't acknowledge that we're all, part of this one God, and you ignore it, then you start coming up with alternative religions that are a lot more inferior, like the stuff from the Dark Ages. Like, I'm going to kill you because you didn't bow down to Jesus, and so I'll kill you, and it doesn't matter anyway because you're going to burn in hell anyway. And so then you start all these religious wars, and countries with faith, with one faith, and belief in God, they're just a lot more harmonious. That's how the Islamic Empire did so well, because they all were harmonious, because they all believed in God, and they believed they're all part of this one being, and they had a lot of enlightenment, reinterest in ancient religions as well. So it wasn't just about Muhammad in ancient Islam in the 1200s, 1100s, 600s to 1200. It was about everything. Muhammad was just the catalyst for it all, but they were interested in everything. It wasn't like Christians today; they only read the Bible. Bible's the only book you should read. They were translating ancient Greeks. So that the mind of God would be, and they say, it's like mental, like the mind. It's all scientific. There's a cause and effect to everything. And there's just specific scientific rules you need to follow, and if you follow those and know that that's the way it is and you can't go against it, then you'll do well. And that's kind of the world we're at now. We follow science, but the whole idea about reincarnation, it's all scientific as well. He said in the book, they said the best way to pray and to acknowledge God and to live a good life is to be good. That's the best way to pray. Just live a good life. Follow the laws of God. Follow the laws of nature. The Tao, and you follow that and you respect it. Follow the laws of the man as well, which are modeled off the laws of God. Then your soul will be able to ascend. So that's basically the gist of the philosophy of Hermeticism, which you get from the Hermeticus corpus, is that God is unchanging. Now, if you want to talk about the evolution of that idea and how it relates to the Dark Ages, is interesting, because people corrupted it, and they start thinking, oh yeah, God is never changing. God is perfect. We're corruptible, and it's all here on this planet. And so the body and anything physical is evil and sinful. And so, what the Hermetic tradition meant with that was that when you're here on this earth, you're living in a body that's temporal, that's going to die, and you have a lot of different activities that you can do within this life. And a lot of those activities you can do could be not beneficial to your soul advancing. It's kind of like, things. There's lots of things you can do with your body that would not be necessarily beneficial to your body, like, say, smoking weed. You smoke weed every once in a while, great. You smoke weed all day, every day, you're going to develop physical problems. So that would become a sin to smoke too much weed, But now that doesn't mean that don't smoke weed at all, you're going to burn in hell forever or whatever. It just means that, like in the days of Egypt, and what they mentioned in the book is one of the sins was sexuality, too much sexuality. So just imagine some farmer somewhere just sitting around masturbating all the time. Well, if you're going to sit around and masturbate all the time, you're not going to be, finding a girlfriend and having a family. You're not going to be farming, and popping up the population. You're teaching the young children, learning things that you can then teach the children. You're not doing work, When you're brought here on the earth, you're brought here on the earth to do work to better the community, which would then better your soul and then let you arrive. If you just sitting around doing one thing too much, like sitting around playing video games all day long for your whole life, overdoing stuff, that would be termed as evil. Those are the evils. Now, In those days, evil, or whatever the word was, which evil was translated out of, it just meant hindrance, something that can pose a danger to your ability to evolve as a soul and reincarnate in a higher level on the earth. But it didn't mean something that's like evil, like we have such this bad connotation, like the devil, like the devil is this person who fell out of the sky from the angels, and he's evil and he's bad and he never should have existed and we need to kill him and he's always going to be in hell, that kind of stuff. It's like, no, not that intense, not that bad. Don't worry. It's just stuff that can get in your way. So the concept of the body being evil, the Christians in the Dark Ages took that too far and just said anything physical is bad, so don't do anything physical. Like, don't have sex at all, stay clothed at all times, don't let anybody see any part of you ever. Make the women put the things over their heads, and then they force people to do it, and that's not the idea. That's just, the idea is just don't get too addicted, to stuff that is just child's play, like when I'm a child, you do childish things. When you grow up, you do grow up things. That's a famous quote, for instance, way back. So, like, you don't want to just, like, play toys and play your G.I. Joe figures until you're adult your whole life. You want to change, and you want to, build stuff off other things. So that's one idea of it. And the other idea, obviously, is God. If you keep your mind, if you believe in God and you believe that you acknowledge that you're going to live forever, and that's what Jesus' main point was. All he was saying is all you have to do is have faith. All you have to do is believe that you're going to believe in God and believe you're going to live forever. And then the Christians changed that into, all you have to do is take Jesus as your personal Savior, and then He'll put you into heaven. That's all you have to do. All you have to do. Well, not quite. All you have to do is believe in God. Believe that we're all part of this one being, and that you're never going to die. Whether you believe in God or not, you're never going to die. But if you believe, that's a huge step, because now everything you do in your life is based off of doing the right thing, because it's always going to come back to you, and that the basic reality of the universe is good and not bad, and that we're all here to grow. And so that's all you have to acknowledge. So that's basically but the cool thing about the book, with the conversations and stuff, is like his son and the king, they would ask intelligent questions and they'd be like, but I don't get it. And it's kind of like it's a dialogue. It was really cool. So yeah, but the other part, the Emerald Tablets, that's basically the actual story. And so yeah, Atlantis sunk, got destroyed. Now, what I think Atlantis was, because Thoth mentioned over and over again that he had a spaceship. After Atlantis sunk, he flew his spaceship to Egypt, and then he made the pyramids, and then he buried his spaceship in a chamber under the pyramid that will one day be found, that has all of the secrets of the society of Atlantis. Now, what I think Atlantis is that, because he said that when Atlantis fell, they decided to move to Egypt. He didn't say why, but what the New Agers say is that, because Egypt is just to build pyramids there, it's in the exact center of Earth, of landmass. You have just as much landmass north of you as south of you there, and just as much east as west, so it's in the center of the world in terms of landmass, and it's also at the 19th degree parallel, which is when all the energy can come to the Earth, and then they can utilize those pyramids. So he built those pyramids and then he says this in the Emerald Tablets. They built the pyramids so that when you lay in the sarcophagus, you get charged with the I think he called it the halls of Hermeti. I think the halls of Hermeti were this mental state you go to when you lay in the sarcophagus of the pyramid, where you go in this timeless state and you get enlightened, and then it can make it so that your soul can actually, your body can live longer and your soul can actually ascend to the higher levels once you die, and be able to reincarnate not on the earth, but on another earth and on a higher level. So But in my opinion, because he said that when they all moved to Egypt, they were attacked by all of the barbarians who lived in Egypt with their sticks, and he said, and he had a rod that he shot lasers out of that made the people go, "Oh my God, this guy's from another place. Don't fuck with him." So then they said, "Okay, we'll do whatever you say. You're the boss." And then that's when he built the pyramids, and they hid the spaceship underneath the pyramid and all that kind of stuff. And they started the religion, and of course he went into legend as being a god because he had that rod with the lasers coming out of it, and he had all that technology. Now, what my opinion of what the of Atlantis was is it was like they had some, like, they were high levels civilization. He didn't say how long that they lived for, but I think they lived for a long time. So, but I think that they were assisted by aliens more than we are now. We've been like sequestered. They were assisted by aliens. So they were kind of like what you would call a colony of the aliens. You know, like when the Greeks would send out colonies around the Black Sea to colonize and bring their culture. It was kind of like that. Aliens coming and colonizing the earth for their souls. That was a level conducive to the high level of their souls. And then and they lived here in Atlantis, but then they screwed things up and it crashed, and they weren't evolved enough to reincarnate off planet, so they had to, continue their society as best they could, and so they moved to Egypt. And I always knew, ever since I was a kid, I always knew that ancient Egyptian, and it was pretty obvious if you think about it because of all the technology that you see in their monuments, but that the religion of the ancient Egyptians, the religion of the ancient Mayans, and the religion of the ancient Indians from their ancient legends was very advanced, more advanced than we are now. Like, they understood. Like, whatever they say, I would agree with. I'd be like, oh, wow, yeah. And that it was beautiful, to the point of being beautiful and very complex. And so to listen to that book and hear all the stuff that I agree with, it was pretty exciting. It was cool. And it confirmed what I always knew. Probably what happened is that, because in the beginning of the book of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth he apparently, when he dictated that book, he had been around. Egypt had already been established, the pyramids had already been built, and he'd been around for a long time. Like, he lived a long time in one body on the earth. And now I think how he did that, and I think he even explained it, was by sleeping inside the pyramid to rejuvenate his body. But he was saying he'd lived here since the gods of men were on earth. So, like in Atlantis, people could live a long time there as well. Like, they were just advanced medically and spiritually, because being spiritually advanced can make your life last longer too, your body live longer. But the name Hermes Trismegistus, there's kind of some debate over what that exactly means, and some people say Hermes Trismegistus just means because he was a master of the three arts, the different parts of Hermeticism: magic, astrology, and like philosophy or something like that. But and there's some other ideas they have too. But what they say on the Emerald Tablets over and over again, they weren't even calling him Hermes Trismegistus. They were calling him Hermes Thrice Born. So what I think Trismegistus means is that he had lived 3 times on the earth. He had reincarnated 3 times, and he knew who his previous reincarnation was. And so he consciously reincarnated on the earth and was born, kind of like Tulkus in Tibetan Buddhism. And so that's why, Hermes Trismegistus, whoever wrote the book, he was Thoth, and so then they connected him with maybe the one who came and originally made the pyramids, because he remembered his past life. And then maybe he lived in Egypt, I don't know, and he remembered his past life when he was in Thoth or whatever, but that's where that came from. here I have to pee, but when I come back, let's talk about the rediscovery of ancient Egyptian religion. How many far are we through? Ooh, 50 minutes already. Because I was drinking lots of coffee. So let's talk about the Hermeticism from the Renaissance point of view, because that Hermeticism is like the rebirth of interest in ancient religions. And that entails a lot of subjects, like the Roman Empire. Because one thing that's interesting to talk about is, and this is actually written in the Hermetic Corpum a lot, is that, you can define something by its contrast, by its relative relationship to other things, and which is an amazing concept and an interesting concept in itself, because like God is never changing and perfect, and like everything is it's like in the static stasis. It's just this perfect configuration, and then it's the outer edges of it, the little things that move along in it. The children of God are what are corruptible and change and everything. But the actual form of God, of the universe, is always going to be the same. There's always going to be a hell. There's always going to be a heaven. There's always going to be level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. There's always going to be every kind of personality. That's why you have the personality archetypes and everything. That's the never-changingness of God. The corruptibility is this world that we live in now. I just lost my train of thought. Oh man, all right. Well, I guess I'll have to pick up when I pick up. But that idea kind of got passed down into the Greeks, because Plato and those guys, they learned from the Egyptians. Plato's grandfather was an Egyptian, and all that information had been, passed down through the years, and in those days, evil and all that kind of stuff, it was just kind of something that was just a part of life. Like for animals, death is just a part of life. It's natural. It's not something to get upset about and try to end. And as time goes on, people get more and more convoluted and start thinking interesting falsities about it. But the lineage of that whole God and ever-changing thing was expressed in like Platonic religion as like the 9 Platonic solids, which I think they got off of the Egyptians, and so that translated into in the Christian world is they thought that the sun was like a giant diamond, or the moon was a diamond, and when Galileo invented the telescope and they looked at that telescope and they saw it was just a rock, that's when they started double thinking things, like, why is it not a diamond? Why is it not never changing? Oh no, the earth is corruptible. Oh yeah, the visible earth we live in now is like changing and stuff, but now we're kind of coming full circle and knowing that there's this underlying energetic pattern inside of earths and suns and stuff that is the diamond and all those Platonic solids and everything. But we went in through a weird period of history, from the fall of Rome to the Renaissance, where we had like really overly simplistic black and white ideas about things. And I think that came about because, like, in a way, the Roman Empire failed. The story of the Roman Empire is a story of Europe trying to create a world of peace. And create a world that had a society and education and could advance and communicate and wasn't constantly getting destroyed. In the ancient world, there were always barbarians off super fit, physically fit warriors who just hunted off in the north in the plains and the cold climates that would come down and destroy societies. And Rome ended up getting destroyed that way. Rome lost the respect of all of the barbarians around them because they were having too many civil wars. And so then all those barbaric tribes they couldn't fight off the barbaric tribes anymore. They lost their power from the civil wars, and so they came in and completely toppled Rome and vandalized, destroyed the city, destroyed books, destroyed ancient knowledge, kind of like what the Genghis Khan and those guys did to the Islamic Empire, going in and just burning books, kind of like what the Christians did to the Mayans when they went in there, killing information, and information dies, and which had happened for a long time in Egypt as well. They had the Library of Alexandria, which in around the time of Christ, they had the Roman civil wars in that area, and Ptolemy burnt down the last Ptolemy burnt down the entire Library of Alexandria, which had all the information from the beginning of Egypt. The Greeks said that there was temples and stuff in Egypt that had actual books telling the story from 9,000 years before them. So they had the actual history books of Atlantis, and they knew everything back then. The educated people did. And luckily we still have one, the Hermetic corpus, which isn't an actual book. It's more like a translation of a translation of a translation. The one we have now is translated in 1600, I think, into English, which was translated from what the Italians had, the Medicis had in the 1500s, which was translated from what the Greeks had in the 100s, which was translated from what the Egyptians had before then, which was probably translated off of another book. But they managed, so they lost a lot, but they managed to keep a lot. They got some corruption in there, but they managed to keep a remarkable amount of it. So yeah, the story of the Roman Empire, it's kind of like the failure of civilization. And so now they didn't have this giant military, because that's what the Roman Empire was for the last couple hundred years of its existence. It was just this huge army that was controlled by not Romans, but just whoever was the strongest general. And then they would have control over the larger army, because if you have, one head controlling all the army, you're going to have less of a likelihood of having infighting and feudalism. That all collapsed into feudalism in the Dark Ages. So you have all these different tribes fighting each other, and which hurt the economy. For example, in the year 800, there's only 2% of shipwrecks found, as in the 100s, which is 2% would be 1/50th. So there was 1/50th of as much trade going on in the Dark Ages as there was in the height of during the Roman Empire. So there was a lot less cities, a lot less educated people, a lot less, to the point that nobody was educated in Europe, which is interesting. We had a whole bunch of writers and educated people in Rome, but by the year 800, when Charlemagne was in power, he's the most powerful emperor of all of Egypt, of Europe, and he couldn't even read. So technology went down. Not just the city of Rome, but all of Europe went down. The only thing that they had during that time to try to maintain that European cohesiveness that they had under the Roman Empire was Christianity. And Rome was still that guiding light. That's where the Pope lived. But it was no longer a military, a big army that was holding society together. It was now a religious philosophy, which had been adopted from the most popular, religion that had come up in that time, Christianity. But it was very ignorant, very watered down, because they didn't have any technology. They didn't have any communication or trade or anything, but they wanted to maintain that unity. And so, if you're going to maintain unity over huge areas of all these different languages and people and religions that still exist forever, the simpler it is, the more likely it's going to be that people are all going to agree. And when you're in a world that's so primitive where people can't communicate, it's you don't have the faculties there to have really complex debates about stuff. So they just watered down Christianity, and they made it real simple, and they were like, yeah, Our Lord and Savior died cross for flock. Once the flock struck 12, the Lord died cross after living life by mount, so that we can all go to heaven. And then they made it really simple. Like, you just have to take the Lord Jesus as your Savior. That was kind of like a inheritance of just give your allegiance to the Emperor of Rome, and everything's good. Because then we'll have one Rome army, and if those barbarians try to come in and fight, we'll just kill them off, and it's just one emperor. He's the emperor, not that other emperor. So you fight, and so just give your allegiance to Jesus, and then you get to go to heaven. That was taken from what Jesus said was just believe in God and you'll go to heaven. You'll go to heaven anyway, but just believe in God and then you'll go there a lot faster. And but one interesting thing about Christianity, I know I'm getting a little bit sidetracked though, is in our higher minds that we all kind of subconsciously agree on, the part of our mind that connects us all, the zeitgeist, which is connected to God, we all know what's the difference between right and wrong. That's why all the things that Jesus did, the selfless things. Somebody robs your money, well then give him your coat. Some Roman makes you haul his crap for a mile, which is what they had to do legally, some Roman citizen. Well then, go that extra mile. Or, if you want to be a good Samaritan, the good Samaritan, it's better to give than to receive. We all know that. And we all agree, we all know that that's the answer to society. So those are the precepts we follow, and all the little things we kind of, in our ignorance, mental ignorance, we kind of make up and make it convoluted and silly. And of course we got rid of the whole reincarnation idea. And then now it's the whole, you get to live forever if you go to heaven, because the reincarnation too complicated. That's like that pagan stuff, that weird religion over there, and these guys don't believe in reincarnation. So let's just make it really simple. So they made it simple, and they just said, give your allegiance to Jesus, and then you get to go to heaven, and that's that. So, but that went on for what, from the 400s all the way until the 1300s. So, but by the time the 1400s came around, when they started to become interested in this stuff again, they were ready for it. Europe had become more united under the French Empire with Charlemagne, and then they united enough to try to do the Crusades to take the Holy Land back, and they ended up, uniting Europe for that military operation, which was a uniting thing, and that way it was good. And then when they came back, they brought back all of the ancient translations of the Arabic Empire. They got rid of the Roman numerals, adopted Arabic numerals, and they just started learning, they started inventing, bringing back technology like street sweeping and lights for cities, and, city planning, and, even discovering that the world around and how big it is and all this kind of stuff, surgery and ancient knowledge that they had been translated off the Arabs, who had translated off of the Greeks, which had been lost to Europe with the fall of Rome and the barbarians taking over. So, and people were really freaked out about losing society because of that whole barbaric thing. Societies, like literate civilizations, had been completely destroyed and reset, set back to square one so many times that when they were living in the Dark Ages, they were freaked out. They were scared, and they just were really afraid that something was going to come and destroy everything. And so that's why I think Christianity in those days and all the way up into now is just really fear-based. It's because people are still freaked out about some barbaric force coming in and just destroying everybody and destroying our society. So they're, if we'd never had the fall of Rome, I think we'd be all chilled out and we'd be more open-minded. Rome itself, in the height of Rome, they were open-minded religiously. They had tons of gods. They had the Roman pantheon, but that was in Rome. And the other parts of the empire, they had all kinds of. They didn't care. They had pagans and paganism and this kind of paganism, this kind of gods, that kind of gods. It didn't matter. All they cared is that they followed the emperor. So they'd have a statue of the emperor in every town, and they say, "Look, he's your god. He's the main god. Follow him. Apart from that, do what you want." And that's why they had a tendency to deify Roman emperors a lot. But and that's why the Romans were like, "Wait, there's one God and Jesus. Like, wait, you think Jesus is God?" But then they kind of switch it around. They go, "Well, Jesus is the representative," and just like now the Pope is a representative, and so they became more interested in stuff, in the 1100s after the Crusades, and then they grew in trade and education, and so they became more interested in like Neoplatonic thought, studying Plato again and all that kind of stuff. In the Renaissance, Renaissance means rebirth in Italian, and that was started in Florence in the from like 1300 to 1500s. The golden age of that was the 1500s. That's when you had the Medicis paying for all of these artists and translators, and Leonardo da Vinci was thinking all this kind of stuff, and they were just having a lot more freedom of thought because the power of the Pope had gotten so much that it was kind of like the fall of Rome. They lost their respect for the Pope. The Pope was just another king, and and so the people in Florence was like, fuck Rome. You guys believe what you want. You can be as watered down as you want, but we're gonna learn some things and study science and study new religions and stuff. So that's when they became interested, and that's when they, Cosimo brought over the ancient Egyptian translations from Greece, and the last of the ancient Bible, the main collection of the philosophy of ancient Egyptian religion, and that was the Corpus Hermeticus. And now this kind of also brings into is the whole idea of like what is occultism and occult societies. And so like the Hermetics were kind of occult societies. So occultism, occult societies, the Hermetics, the Masons, early Christians from the early days of the Christian church, they've always existed because ever since throughout time, you're always going to have ignorant masses, and you're always going to have intelligent sectors of society, well-read people, or just advanced souls who have open minds, or who had parents who loved them, who had parents who loved, or just smart people. There's always going to be smart people and stupid people. So those occult societies were the smart people. We like to say, ever since 1492, we always thought that the world was flat. Well, that's kind of like saying today we all know that there's no aliens. Well, sure, the majority of the people think that the Earth is alone in the universe and that there's no aliens flying around us. But that doesn't mean that everybody believes that, and that's how it was in the past. There were always people who believed in reincarnation in Europe. There always believed people who had preserved the ancient knowledge. Especially until the fall of Rome, you had all sorts of really wise people. You had the illusion mysteries, which were people initiated into the ancient knowledge. They would eat magic mushrooms, and then they would connect to God. See, one big idea of Hermeticism is that we're all part of God. Which means that we can all communicate with God ourselves. You don't need to have like some priest do it for you and tell you what to think. We're not like mindless robot followers. We can actually do it ourselves. And so they'd eat their mushrooms, and mushrooms did exist in Europe in those days. They exist more in northern climates, I think, but they exist in Hawaii. So I think they existed all over. It was probably in the Christian era where they killed off all the mushrooms, and they killed the mushroom fields, and now they only exist in the heathen times. When I was in Europe, when I was in Norway, town of Trondheim, magic mushrooms grow all over the place. You just walk around, pick them up off the ground, eat them. I ate them, and they're good. They're little ones, and they're not as strong, but they do it. And so, there's people who always knew. There were always smart people who didn't subscribe to this watered down, black and white, oversimplified, fear-based, heaven and hell idea of Catholic Christianity, which, unfortunately their main goal was just to suppress information to try to keep it as watered down and uniform as possible, because that's what they thought the formula was to have a one world society, Christianity. So that's who the Hermetics were. They were just groups of people, but they had to do it a cult. They had to do it in their own little, privately, because if they were too public about it, then they would the powers that be, the Roman Empire, the Catholic Empire, would suppress you. Burn you at the stake. They suppressed Gianardo Bruno in 1500s for saying the Earth wasn't the center of the whole universe. They were going to burn Galileo at the stake, but he was friends with the Pope, and they let him go. I mean, this is dangerous. So they had to protect themselves. They had to, be a cult, be hidden, just do it privately, just with the people who are smart. And so, like the Masons, I think they were kind of like that. I don't know that much about them, but they were just a certain, subsect. They believe in the positive aspects of Christianity, so they'll call themselves Christians. But they also believe in this other stuff. They believe in the reincarnation. They believe in a more holistic concept of God and astrology. I think astrology came from ancient Hermeticism. One interesting thing, if you think about it, is astrology is an ancient belief that has existed all over the world forever. And it's always 12 zodiacs, I think. The Chinese have their own zodiacs, been around forever. India's had their own, Egypt's had their own. And all this stuff was adopted from them over time. And so the idea, well, where does astrology originally come from? Maybe it came from Egypt and India. In the time of Atlantis, maybe the whole world had these outposts. It wasn't like the whole world was advanced people. I think in those days, in the days of Atlantis, you would have, because you want to think about it in terms of advancement of souls. In those days, the people on Earth, their souls weren't advanced enough to be complicated. So most of the people were just cavemen. But then you had the more advanced souls who came here and lived on Atlantis, and then they had some outposts in India, which is where the stories of the Mahabharata came from. But then they started fighting each other, maybe because you have two different orders of people. You have the barbarian people, and then the barbarian souls would get reincarnated into Atlantis, and then they would kind of got corrupted, and it just got, it just kind of got dragged down. Like if you send a bunch of barbarians into a country, you can drag the country down, and so maybe that's what happened, soul-wise. And so now we go through this period of a few thousand years, and we're all kind of evolving together. And now our whole planet can finally become spiritually advanced enough to be open-minded and believe in God, that we all live forever. We all reincarnate. All you have to do is believe that you're going to reincarnate and live forever, and then we can live in a stress-free world where we're all chill and we all open-minded, and we can see the light side of things. Glass is half full. We can criticize each other without fear of getting murdered and that kind of stuff. Live in a more utopian society. But so yeah, the Hermetic tradition is basically the rediscovery of ancient Egyptian religion in the Renaissance, and all of the complex beliefs that they have. I mean, when I'm talking about the Hermetic corpus or whatever, there's a lot more in there than what I mentioned. I think it's 7 hours and 11 minutes of constant reading, so it's like an actual book. There's a lot of information in there. I think the chapter of Aeschylus is like an hour and a half long, the conversation. And so yeah, that's basically what happened. Atlantis falls. They start Egypt. They build all the pyramids. They keep in touch with the halls of Hermeti, their enlightenment. They can sit in the sarcophagus to connect with God, and then it kind of gets as you pass through time, all of that ancient knowledge kind of and all of the alien influence in teaching us, new societies kind of stopped. They decided to leave us alone and we'll figure it out ourselves. And so we kind of went on a dip with our religion, and then went through the Roman Empire and all its problems in the Dark Ages, and then the Renaissance, and then we invent stuff, and now we're getting real help from aliens, although we don't really know it. Technological help, and now we're having another rebirth now. So yeah. So let me just really quickly, just a rehash of what Hermeticism is. It's that we're all God, we're all part of God, we're all going to live forever no matter what. All you have to do is believe that you're going to live forever. We all reincarnate. We incarnate from animals up. One interesting thing he said is that the larger body that you live in, the more difficult it is for your soul to evolve. Because you're actually carrying more karma with you, So if you're going to be reborn from a little bird into a human, now, and if you're a younger soul and it's the first time being a human, now you've got struggles. And it's kind of, the analogy would be, if you live a really simple life out in the woods, your life is easy and stuff. But now if you live in the city, all of a sudden you have all this stuff. You're like, oh my God, oh look, oh caviar, TV, oh my God, I love this, oh my God, luxury. But then it makes you weak, and then you get addicted to it, and then it ends up not being good for you. And that was actually, in the ancient days, common knowledge with technology. That's why the barbarians didn't really respect Rome all that much, and they didn't want to become part of the Roman Empire. Because they knew as soon as they started farming and wearing nice linens and sleeping on comfortable beds, well, now their muscles are going to get smaller, and they're going to get shorter, and they're going to get weaker, and now somebody's going to kick their ass, and they're not going to be as badass and as honorable in that way. They really took a lot of pride in being able to take baths in freezing cold rivers and only wear animal hides and hunt animals, barehanded and all that kind of stuff. They were into that. But for your soul it's good because it keeps you strong and disciplined. But for a society to have a civilization with all of these amenities is what we need, because it brings us together, and it makes us so that we can focus on the higher, and evolve our minds mentally and understand, because that's what the highest part of religion is anyway. It's science. Highest magic, highest religion, highest everything. It boils down to science. It's the universal laws of truth. That's what they were saying in the Hermetic corpus. So it's kind of like this weird oxymoron, like new technology gets you to the next level, but it can also impede your soul. It can also be evil. So now, when I say evil, I just mean something that's a danger, something marijuana is evil. Sure, you smoke too much of it, or alcohol. Water can be evil. You drink too much, you can fuck up your electrolytes and die. It's just, so that's what evil is. It's not. But in the Christian era, it's all about, no way, you are bad. So now Muslims are all bad. If you're a serial killer, you're all bad. You can't just be a sick person. You can't. But as time goes on, we just get a lot more, compassionate and look at stuff. Because now nobody has to be evil. In a huge world where we all go to heaven and we all reincarnate forever, there's no bad people. There's just sick people, or young souls, or people who've grown through problems. They do bad things, like Hitler thought that he was fixing the world by killing all the Jews. Well, turns out he was wrong. Doesn't mean he's going to burn in hell for all eternity. Just means that he'll get reborn as a dog, and then he'll be reborn as a bird, and then he'll be reborn as a human, and then he'll be a saint. Doesn't make me an evil person for saying that Hitler one day is going to be a saint and be a god. All it means is that the universe is a big place, Doesn't mean that I'm a fucking Nazi now, just because I'm saying that, it doesn't make me a serial killer just because I say that a serial killer one day is going to go to heaven, I mean, it's just the expansion of our minds and being able to talk about it without all this judgment, black and white, simplistic ideas. But it's coming full circle, man. Like figuring out the ancient truths of Hermetic religion. And I mean, obviously, whatever they say, their religion's going to be most advanced anyways. If it's all related, religion, science, and magic. Well, they obviously have the highest science. I mean, they built pyramids we can't build today. They had knowledge about stuff we don't have. They built, temples, Baalbek, and all this kind of stuff. They had the technology to harness energy into those pyramids to make your body live forever and to create electricity. I mean, their religion would have been high too, because it's all related. Religion, science, and magic, it's all the same thing. If you get high enough, in 500 years, those words, religion, science, magic, it's just different aspects of the same thing. So that's what I think about Hermeticism. I forgot to mention a very, very important aspect of the Hermetic religion, what I remember listening to over and over again in lots of different ways. When I was listening to the Hermetic Corpus, the book about the philosophy, is the whole mind, the whole mental concept. He was saying that the way that God creates things, the ever-changing, the everlasting, non-changing God creates new things that are temporal, is by a thought. They always think of it first. You think of it first, and then you do it. And we're all creators too. Since we're all God, we all can do things that God can do. We can create. But the first step in creating is by thinking. You have to imagine it first. First you imagine that, and that actually exists in your head. Just like you exist in the mind of God. It exists now in your head. Now you can actually physically do it. Now you have the motivation and the plan, and the vision and the goal to go out there and make it a reality. So one big aspect of the Hermetic tradition is alchemy. And alchemy is the idea of turning like regular metals into gold. The real essence of that is basically turning anything into possibility. They had all kinds of, visions of the future, visions of what's possible, making metals into gold. Using the technology that you have at your means to the maximum potential. This is kind of, I guess, related to the whole Gothic cathedral movement. Back in the Renaissance, they started to make really big Gothic cathedrals. They had these giant visions of let's make them really big and tall, and they started to do it. They had the idea, and then they did it. And they were just having visions of, utopian societies and all this kinds, because they understood the Hermetic principle of first it begins in a thought, first it begins in a plan. And so now, guess what? We can make metal into gold. It costs a lot of money, but we can do it. It's possible. We can make metal into gold. And for a long time, skeptical people were just like, oh, that's impossible. That's just magic. Well, magic and alchemy is all it is dreaming up something. And then, of course, later on when you figure out how to do it, you build it. So whatever you can think of, it's because you can actually do it. That's the whole idea of alchemy. An alchemist is somebody who does not have any limits in their mind, and so they physically don't have any limits. I think Jesus made this quote in the quote of, you can move mountains. All you need is faith. And we can move mountains. I mean, we'd have to stop spending all those billions of dollars on all the wars against the hippies in America and against the brown people on the other countries, and actually start helping people and having faith in everybody and setting up like a communist system to take care of the basic needs, medical bills and everything of regular normal people, and understand that they're parts of God just like us and they have just as many capabilities as we are. Hell, we'll have strong enough of a GDP, we could literally move a mountain. Move mountains. We can do it. It's possible. Anything you can dream of is possible. And the bigger you set your dreams, the bigger your goals can be. And the other part of alchemy would I guess it turned into chemistry. But look at all the cool stuff we can do with chemistry. And why can we do all the cool stuff with chemistry? It's because we believe. And it's because we follow the laws of God. Science. And and so basically that's the alchemical section of it. And as far as astrology, another aspect of Hermeticism is it's just astrology is the leftovers from super high level knowledge of how the actual universe works, the galaxy. Like knowing that if you're positioned here in the galaxy, then all the planets who have certain shoot certain rays of certain energies to each other are now shooting to the Earth. And so you have those certain characteristics. If you're born on a certain day, you became into the Earth, and your little ever-changing crystal of possibilities now become frozen into a certain person. At that moment, and that of the galaxy, of the where you're at in the world, now you have all those capabilities. And so astrology is high-level astronomy, basically. So magic basically is science that is so advanced that people don't understand the principles of it, so they just say, okay, I believe it exists, I believe what it can do. I don't know the mechanics of it or how to reproduce it, but one day we will. So alchemy, magic and stuff turns into science. Science that's high enough appears to be magic to low-end people, and then they totally don't understand it at all. Like cargo cults, they don't know what planes are. They think they can make the plane come back if they make a bunch of logs shaped as a plane, or something like that. So, So, anyways, the other big point of Hermeticism is the vision. It all starts with the first step of creating something is in your mind. Like it's very real. You're actually creating it, and that's the first step. And so we have to be allowed to think freely, and speaking freely is also a very important aspect of that. We have to be able to speak freely, and that's the beauty of America. That's the number one beauty of America. There's lots of beauties of America, but the first one is that Americans are allowed to speak freely, say whatever they want, and which allows you to think whatever you want, and think really big. And then, guess what you can create? You can create what America creates. All the technology that we've invented. So it all begins with the thought, the mental thought of God and us, because we are God. Okay, that's it. Peace out.